And cheers, Lilu Nishmat Avi Morido, Ber Meir Ben Ruben Halevi, Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. Also would like to dedicate tonight's cheer to the memory of Liz Kruger, Chana Kela Bat Yaakov Yehuda Rachel, who passed away this week. Her music, her smile, her care brought warmth to all who knew her, and may she have her neshama have an aliyah in Shemayim. So this week we're going to talk about the parshat of Ki Taytzay, and let's go right to the sources. Why is this not working properly? Okay, so this week's parsha, we have a very interesting word that is used to describe certain actions. The word is to'eva or to'avat, which appears 4 times in our parsha. But in order to get an understanding of what it's all about, I wanted to go through all of the other times that this word to'eva appears throughout the Torah. And there are a total of 23 other times that this word appears in the Torah. And I want to see, through understanding this, if we can find a commonality and see the commonality of all of the times where this phrase, this word, appears throughout the Torah, and then try to apply it to the mitzvot that we have in this week's parsha. So the first time this word appears is actually in the context of the story of Yosef and his brothers. And it tells us that when Yosef's brothers, not yet knowing he was Yosef, came to buy grain, and we know that Yosef made them go back and get Binyamin, and they come back with Binyamin, and Yosef makes a party for his brothers. And it says during this party in Perek Mem Gimel and Bereshis, Vayasimu lo levado v'lahem levadam, that the food that was served at this party Yosef was served separately, and the brothers were served as a group, but separately from Yosef. And the Egyptians who were part of Yosef's court, who joined this meal, also ate separately. They all ate together, but they ate separately from the brothers and from Yosef. Because we know the Egyptians did not sit and break bread with Ivrim, with the Jews, with the descendants of Avram Avinu. Ki to'eva hi lemitzrayim. Now here to'eva appears as something that was not palatable, not fathomable for an Egyptian who worshipped animals, specifically sheep, to be able to sit and eat a meal with a Jew who ate his God. This is a to'eva. This is something that we would translate perhaps an abomination. We have similarly, later on when the brothers settle after, they find out that this is really Yosef, they come down to Egypt to settle, and Yosef tells them that when you go to Paro and you want to make sure that you are given a separate area to dwell in, he says you should tell Paro Vamartem and Shemik now you have a decha. Tell Paro that you are shepherds, you're anshe mikneh, you are dealers in animals, and this is your job for your entire life. From the time we were very young, it's our family business. In order that you will live in Eretz Goshen, which is not part of Egypt proper or separated from Egypt proper. Why? Again, Toavat Mitzrayim Kol Ro Eitzon. Shepherds were an abomination for Egypt. Why? Because they worship the sheep. Shepherds, what do? They use the sheep. They provides them their parnasa, provides them their food, provides them their clothing. Egyptians who worship the sheep did not do any of these things with the sheep. Therefore, it was an abomination for them to live in proximity to shepherds. So again, we have this word to'eva, something that is abomination and inappropriate. Similarly, when Moshe is talking to Paro about sending the Jews out to worship God, and Paro says, nah, go worship God here in Egypt. You don't need to go for a 3-day journey to worship them. Moshe answers him, Lo nachon lasot kain. It's improper for us to do that again. Ki to'avat Mitzrayim, the thing that is an abomination to the Egyptians. Nizbach l'Adonai Eloheinu. We are going to offer to God offerings of the Egyptian gods, which the Egyptians hold as sacred. Are we going to be able to slaughter something that is to'avat Mitzrayim, that the Egyptians receive their slaughter as an abomination in front of their eyes, and they're not going to stone us to death? So again, Moshe uses the same term twice in the same pasuk, to'avat Mitzrayim, that this is something that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So we see that this word to'eva is something that is an abomination, something that is repulsive to somebody to see it happen. So that's one meaning of the word that we see very clearly from these first usages in Bereshit and Shemot. The next time we have the word toiva is in the chapter of Vayikra, where we have one section where the word appears numerous times, and this is the chapter that deals with relatives that we are not allowed to marry, relatives with whom marriage is not applicable under Jewish law, close relatives. We talk about a brother marrying a sister, a son marrying a mother, etc., etc. And then the parsha then continues with the following. You should not lie with a male the same way you lie with a female. To'evahi, this is at to'eva. It's something that is repulsive. It's an abomination according to the Torah. And then later on it tells us, Ushmartem atem et chukotai v'et mishpatai. Hashem tells us, Moshe telling us through Hashem's words, that when we, Am Yisrael, keep and guard chukotai mishpatai, the mitzvot of Hashem, the lo tasumi kol ha'toivot ha'elam, we will not do any of these abominations. What are these abominations? Are intermarrying close relatives, marrying people who we're not supposed to be marrying. That is our legacy as the Jewish people. All of these abominations are what the people who lived in Eretz Yisrael before us did, and through it the land became tamei, became impure. And what happens when the land becomes impure? The land should not literally vomit you out when you make it impure, like it vomited out the people that were before you. Again, whoever does these to'evot, these abominable things, and they will be cut off from their people. Shmartem et mishmarti, and you, those of you who are faithful to your Judaism, you will refrain from doing these to'evot, these abominable things that were done before them. And you will not become impure through them. So our mission as the Jewish people is to avoid those things that are called to'eva. Now, again, as I said, this parak here in Vayikra, as well as the next citation, which is Vayikra parak Chaf, which is again a very similar citation. Again, a male who lies with another male in the way that one lies with a female. To Eva Asu Shnehem, they have both committed an abomination. Motu matu d'be'embam. It is a capital crime under Torah law, and each of these things is called a to'eva. So here, in this context, in Vayikra, where as opposed to the context in Bereshit and Shemot, where it's referring to something that was worshipped being eaten, in that context, here it's talking about an illicit, an inappropriate relationship sexually. So that is the second use of to'eva in the Torah. First use being, as I said, inappropriate eating of something that is sacred. Second, it is inappropriate sexual relationship. Now, in Devarim, other than our parsha, we have the word toiva a number of times, and we're going to see that there's again a common thread that runs through all of these. Okay, let's start with Devarim Perek Zayin, beginning of parshat Ekeb, tisrafun ba'esh. The idols of their gods should be burned. Lo tachmod kesef v'zav aleim v'lakach talach. You should not desire any adornments of gold and silver that are upon the idols, that are an integral part of the idol, and take it. Penti v'keshbo, you will be trapped by it. You will be ensnared by this gold and silver. Ki toavat Hashem elokecha, anything that was part of an idol that was used for idolatrous purposes is a toiva before Hashem. By taking this gold and silver and bringing it into your house, you should not bring this abominable thing into your house, and you will become a cherem, which is literally something that is banned like it. It must be completely destroyed. You should abhor it and destroy it because it is cherem. Again, ta'ef ta'avenu is the same root as to'avat mitzrayim, that it should be something that you detest so much that the only thing you can do is destroy it. Here again, talking about not eating something that was worshipped, but using something that is an idol for your own benefit. And so that's another use there. We're going to see that throughout Sefer Dvarim. Again, similarly here, when we come into Eretz Yisrael, we're told, and Hashem will destroy the nations in front of us. You have to be very careful, lest you be trapped after them. After you've destroyed all of the goyim before you, you're going to seek out their idolatrous gods and say, well, if these people, these gods were good enough for these people, I'll do the same. Let me do the same. We shall not do this to Hashem. Again, all of these abominations that Hashem hates, they did to their gods as ways of worshiping them. Like what? They would even burn their children in fire as an offering to their gods. God does not want that. So again, it's a to'avah, something that's abomination to God is worshiping idols in certain ways, in this specific parshat. But again, we're going to see that thread run throughout the use of to'avah here in Sefer Dvarim. Is it referring in general to idolatry? Okay. Same here later on in the next parak, we have the concept of the Ir Hanidachat, an entire city that decided to worship idols. And again, how does the Torah describe it? You should seek out the facts. You should investigate. You have to ask deep penetrating questions. Behold, the thing was true. What? Then that an entire city gave up and left God and agreed to worship idols. Again, this is a toivah. Taking a group to worship idols is also a to'eva. Whether you do it as a single individual, you do it as a group, to'eva, something that is disgusting. Again, in a very different context now, we have the concept of lo tochal to'eva. In parshat Rei, it tells us we're not allowed to eat anything that is to'eva. This, by the way, is the opening pasuk of the laws that tell us which animals we are allowed to eat and which animals we're not allowed to eat. So here, it does not, this is even though we're in Sefer Dvarim, here it does not refer to idolatry. It refers to eating something that Hashem has commanded us not to eat. Makes it a to'eva, even though the Gemara uses this pasuk to learn a specific laws about kashrut and what we're allowed to eat and not allowed to eat. The general shot of the pasuk is that anything that Hashem has commanded us not to eat is called to'eva, something that we should view as something that we cannot stomach, we cannot allow ourselves to eat because Hashem has forbidden us to eat it. So that is different than all the to'evat we've mentioned so far in Dvarim, which refer to idolatry. This one is referring to, again, eating or transgressing what we eat and the laws of kashrut. Back now to, again, other aspects of this word to'eva. In last week's parsha, we read, Lo tizbach l'Hashem elokecha shor v'aseh. You should not bring as an offering to Hashem any animal asher yiyeh bo mum, that has some type of physical deformity, physical defect, kol davar ra, anything that causes it not to look to be a full, complete animal. Ki toavat Hashem alokecha. Again, this is something that is not appropriate before Hashem. Giving Hashem a gift that isn't a fair gift, that isn't a proper gift. And if we go to the book of Malachi, the last of the Nevi'im, he expounds on this specific mitzvah, because apparently in his day this was something that people had forgotten, this mitzvah, or they didn't care about this mitzvah. And he says to them, imagine that you were going to just the governor, or you were going to your local ruler. Would you bring him an animal that was deformed, that didn't look right? Is what the Mishlei, the Navi, says in Mishlei. How can you say, bring this animal to Hashem, if it's not a good-looking animal? We wouldn't even give it as a gift to our best friend. We wouldn't give it to the king, and how much more so shouldn't we try to, quote, pawn it off as a karban to Hashem? Again, this is to'eva, something that is inappropriate behavior completely, such that it should make us disgusted. Okay, again, back to using the word toiva here in the context of avodah zarah. Ki Taytzay b'kirbecha. Again, this is last week's parsha. What did he do to do that which was evil in the eyes of Hashem? He went and served other gods. And again, what does the Torah say? Very similar to the phraseology we had above in the Israel. Again, it was true. We found out that this was a fact. And this abominable thing had been done in Israel, that people as individuals had worshipped idols, bowed down to something other than God as a godlike power. Again, this person obviously has committed a capital crime. He is punished if there are proper witnesses and proper testimony. But again, the word to'eva, here again, back into the context of avodah zarah. And the last occurrences of in last week's parsha, again, all sorts of different sorts of divination, of sorts of different idolatry. Again, the chapter is introduced with, when you come to Eretz Yisrael, when you get into Eretz Yisrael, Moshe tells us, you should not learn to do like the abominations, and I got this one again, like the abominations of these nations. And what are they? You shouldn't have anybody who passes their children in fire, kosem ksamim, diviners, different types of sorcery, divining. Again, all of these are different types of wizardry, witchcraft, trying to determine the future. The chover chaver, shol ovidoni, people who make do seances and try to reach the dead and speak through all sorts of mediums. The dorish alametim, and again, try to contact the dead spirits to find out what is going on. Ki toavat Hashem kol osa eila. These are all toavat Hashem. Ubiglala toivot ha'ela, because of these toivot, Hashem lokech misham mipanecha. This is exactly why Hashem is throwing them out of Eretz Yisrael and allowing you to have Eretz Yisrael. Tamim tiyeh Hashem lokecha. We have to be complete and whole with Hashem. So again, the word to'ava in the context of idolatry, and similarly, when we are told we have to destroy all the nations of Eretz Yisrael, in order that they don't teach you how to do all of the abominable things they did to their gods. And if you do learn that, you will have sinned to Hashem. So we see, as I said, throughout Sefer Dvarim, with the exception of a few cases, Toiva refers to idolatry. In Vayikra, it refers to immorality. In the rest of the times we have the toiva, it refers to eating something that was totally inappropriate to eat, that should disgust us to eat. We have two more instances after our parsha. In next week's parsha, we will read, again, in the context of idolatry, cursed be the person who makes an idol or any type of image that is an abominable thing before Hashem. And similarly, in Hazinu, we have Yakni'u Bizarim, that in the future, that when the Jews would rebel against Hashem, they would cause him to be jealous through Strange gods, b'toivot yachisu, again, God, they would anger God through worshiping idolatry. So we see that toivah refers to idolatry and immorality primarily, and except for our parsha, where we're going to have 4 usages of the word that are totally out of context or out of this norm. So the first one we have, and now to get back to our parsha. In our parsha, we're told the following: Lo yech ligever al isha, v'lo yilbash gever simlat isha, ki toavat Hashem Elokecha kol osa eila. There should not be worn by a woman man's clothing that is specifically geared and garbed for men, and a man should not wear women's clothes. So in other words, you shouldn't be a cross-dresser. It seems to be what the Torah is saying. Again, ki to'avad Hashem Elokecha kol osa eila. This is considered a to'eva. Now, if we go to our classic meanings of to'eva, idolatry, immorality, this doesn't on the surface seem to fit. Yet if we go one level deeper, and Rashi takes us there based on the Midrash, tells us that the purpose of, at least in the ancient world perhaps, maybe not so much today, of people who dressed up as the opposite gender was primarily so that they had access to the other gender, and typically for immoral purposes, it seems. At least that's what Rashi seems to say, based on the Midrash, is the context of this pasuk. The intent of this pasuk is that one should not be wearing clothes that are of the other gender, specifically so that they can mix in with the other gender. Again, that's why I say today, this perhaps is not as evident to us, because garb today, or intermingling, let's put it this way, intermingling of gender roles, specifically whether we're talking about in the workplace or even in the marketplace, today is very different than it was back then. In the ancient world, as a man, you generally interacted with males. As a female, you generally interacted with females in your day-to-day routine. And as such, wearing clothing of the other gender was generally for a non-appropriate purpose. And that's exactly why the Torah says, Ki to'avat el Hashem Elokecha kol osa eila, because it was primarily intended to lead to immoral behavior. That was the intent of the wearer, was to be able to find confidants or people to engage in illicit behavior with. So that perhaps might fit the mold that we had in Vayikra of to'eva, referring to specifically immoral behavior. Now, the next one, again, also seems to, on the surface, it might not fit the mold, but does, I think, also. Again, lo taviat nan zona u'mechir kelev. You should not bring. Now, this is a very strange part. Etnan zona is the hire of a zona, of a harlot. U'mechir kelev, or the price of a dog, something that was traded for a dog, or a dog was bought from its proceeds. Beit Hashem Elokecha neder. You should not bring this to Hashem as a korban. Ki to'avad Hashem Elokecha gam shnehem, because the way that these were obtained, the way that this money was used to purchase a korban, was inappropriate. These two things are to'eva before Hashem. Again, perhaps some of the parsha want to suggest that, again, this is related not to the immorality but to the idolatry aspect, because there are those that would take an animal that couldn't be used as a korban, specifically a dog, and they would trade it for an animal that could be brought as a korban, a sheep or a goat, and would offer that to their idol. So that perhaps is one of the reasons for that. Again, etnan zona is the hire of a harlot. Again, because somebody who hires a harlot, her taking those proceeds and using it for a korban, again, seems counterintuitive. It's the equivalent of somebody who steals money and takes it and gives tzedakah with it. Well, God doesn't want you to give tzedakah with stolen money, just like He doesn't want you to use ill-gotten money to bring a korban to Hashem. So perhaps here there's a little bit of idolatry because of the mechir kelev. There may be a little bit of immorality, certainly the etnan zona. But again, this to'eva is, again, a very general to'eva that that the Torah describes in these specific events, because the end result is I am trying to bring a karban with something that's inappropriate. So perhaps that's another meaning of to'eva, that I am using something for an inappropriate purpose. We had that before in the case of Yosef and the brothers, where the Egyptians felt that taking their idol and using it for food was an inappropriate use. That's a to'eva. So here too, perhaps that same concept of taking something that is clearly inappropriately earned or achieved or gotten and using it to bring it as a karban. Okay, the next time we have the word to'eva in our parsha is in the concept of a very interesting halacha, and this relates to marriage and divorce. So let's begin first by understanding what halacha is, and then what the to'eva is. Okay, first the Torah tells Kikach ish isha of Allah, when a man takes a wife and marries her. If she does not find favor in his eyes, he found something inappropriate in her, he is entitled. He has the right to write her a book, a writ of divorce, and give it to her and send her out of his house. Now, again, we have to understand that typically it's the man who takes the woman, because the man is, again, they're very, very not politically correct, but the man is the breadwinner. The man is the one who is the homeowner, who owns the resources. He is bringing the wife into the home. But if she doesn't find favor in his eyes, he is entitled to divorce her. Okay, that's the first pasuk. Laws of divorce, how you're allowed to marry and divorce a wife. Now this woman left his house, went and remarried someone else. Okay, that's the second thing that happens here. The second man also decided he didn't like her. The second husband divorced her also, and sent her from his house. Or her second husband now died. So now she's now a widow, and she's been divorced, and she's now a widow. Now the Torah gives us a very, very specific law to this case. This woman, a woman who was married and divorced, and then married a second time, and is no longer married the second time, either through divorce or through losing her husband to death. What happens in this case? She can no longer remarry her first husband. Her first husband is no longer able to remarry her. After she has become defiled, she has become tameh. Ki Taytzay Hashem. Even though we know that had she not married someone else, she is allowed to remarry her husband. In other words, a person who has divorced his wife is allowed under Torah law and under rabbinic law to remarry that wife, as long as she has not married anybody else. Doesn't matter whether he's married somebody else, that's irrelevant. As long as she is not remarried, he is allowed to take her back as his wife. But once she is remarried, she can no longer return to that first husband. And that's considered, again, a to'eva. And by doing, we should not cause the land to sin that Hashem has given us as an inheritance. So again, the question here is, what is this to'eva? Why is this such a to'eva? Again, the second husband divorced or divorced her or died. Why should she be any different than the woman whose husband divorced her and then she didn't remarry? The Torah says this is to'eva. Now, the Parshanim want to tell us that one of the reasons for this is because the Torah was very, very concerned that this could lead to a very, very interesting phenomena known as wife swapping. That if I marry someone and divorce her, and then somebody else marries her and I can take her back, well, then we would just, we don't like our wives, so we'll swap for this week. We'll both divorce our wives. We'll take each other's wives, and that will go. Then we can do it next week. We'll swap back again. We'll both divorce them again and swap them back. This is exactly what the Torah did not want to have, and that's why, according to one Perush, that's the whole rationale for this mitzvah, for this commandment, that Hashem, again, why? again, now we're back to this whole concept of illicit relationships, that if we are allowed to marry and divorce and marry and divorce and divorce and marry all the time, then we have lowered the value of marriage. We've decreased the sanctity of marriage. And we have, by doing that, we are creating a world with lower values of family, lower moral values. And again, this toiva, as I said, if we look at it from that perspective, clearly seems to fit the toiva definition of Vayikra, that we are we are commanded to have pure relationships, pure family lives, pure sexual relations, and we are not supposed to be in a loose sexual environment. That's not what the Torah wants. Torah wants families to be very strong, people to respect spouses, men to respect their wives, and they shouldn't be somebody who we can just get rid of and bring back and get rid of at will. And that, I think, is another important aspect of this concept of to'eva, of sexual purity, as I said before, in terms of Vayikra. But now we get to the final word to'eva that appears in our parsha, which again doesn't fit any of the molds, and I think it's there primarily to emphasize the importance of a very, very seemingly minor mitzvah or minor group of mitzvot, and it's toward the end of the parsha. So let's go to this one now. It says, Lo yiyeh lecha b'kischa even va'aven gedola uktana. You should not have in your pocket a stone and a stone, a large one and a small one. Now, what does that mean? It means that you should not have two measuring stones, two stones that you measure with that are different sizes. One is a large one that you use when you're trying to buy. So you put that in the balance scale when you're buying, so people will have to put more in to get the appropriate amount, or a small one. You shouldn't even have it. It doesn't say you shouldn't use them. It's you should not even have it. You should not even have in existence an even and oven. And similarly, you should not have in your house two measures that are supposedly the same thing, an ephah and an ephah. One is a gedolah, one's a big one, one's a katana, one's a small one. In other words, you shouldn't have two measurements that purport to be exactly the same, but are really different in size. Probably not by much, even if we're talking about 1%, 2%, or a small amount. Nonetheless, the fact that they're not properly calibrated exactly correctly is a problem. Even having it, not using it in your trade, even if you're not even a tradesman, you should not have such measures in your house. Even shlema v'tzedek yalach. When it comes to an even, a stone that's used to weigh, it should be a complete stone. Ephah shlema v'tzedek yalach. Again, your weight, your measuring cup that you use to measure should be a complete and righteous and appropriate measure. Leman, now interestingly enough, leman yarichu yamecha alo adama, in order that you will have long life, that your days will be long upon the adama sher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, on the land that Hashem has given you. Again, ki to'avat Hashem Elokecha kol osa elah. People who do these things that we've just described above are to'avat Hashem Elokecha. This is an abomination before God, having two sets of weights, one that you use when you're buying, one that you use when you're selling, to try to get a little bit of an edge in each transaction, just to get that scraping off the top of each transaction. Kol osa avo. By doing that, you are doing something that is inappropriate. Now, again, as I said, if we look through our uses of the word toiva that we've come across so far, this doesn't fit any of them. It doesn't fit idolatry. It doesn't fit immorality. It doesn't fit inappropriate gifts, using things for the wrong purpose. Those are the three uses that we had for to'eva so far. This one is a much different use of the word, but it's using it here to emphasize how terrible what you've just done is. What did I do that was so terrible? So I skimmed a little bit off the top of each transaction. The fact of the matter is, by doing that, I have committed a sin that I can never, ever attempt to do tshuva for. I can never try to undo this. Why? Because who knows how many countless transactions I have used these inappropriate items on, that I can never possibly refund everybody's money. I could not find every person I ever engaged in a transaction with and figure out the exact amount that I was due to give them. Rambam lists this: a person who constantly cheats people of little amounts. They may be minuscule amounts, but he's constantly cheating people of minuscule amounts. That's the person who cannot do tshuva. He's one of the people who can never do tshuva because he'll never be able to find everybody and do tshuva. This is a tova. This is something that, why? Because I'm doing it because my perception is that nobody knows the difference. They got approximately what they wanted. They got what they deserved. They got what they expected. It's no big deal. But it is a big deal in Hashem's eyes, because Hashem, you're saying, Hashem isn't watching. You're saying Hashem doesn't care what I do by doing that. Anybody who engages in commerce in such a way that we can tell from their actions that they don't believe that Hashem is watching, that is a to'eva. So as we read this parsha, as I said last week, this is one of those parshas that are always read in the month of Elul, when we are busy thinking about our annual spiritual accounting, our annual review of looking over and figuring out what it is we are going to be bringing with us. When we ask Hashem to bless us and give us and grant us a new year, we have to focus on the little things, even that little bit of that transaction, because it reminds us, and it forces us to think about the fact that wherever we are going in life, Hashem is watching us. And when we go through life with that perspective, with that perception that Hashem is watching what we're doing and cares about what we're doing and wants us to avoid these things that are called to'eva, so that we can have long life as the Am Yisrael, we should have long life in Eretz Yisrael. We need to focus on an awareness of Hashem in our lives, in our day-to-day, not just in the big things of idolatry and immorality, but even in the small things of conducting our business every day, day in, day out. We hope and pray that we learn these lessons of realizing and watching that Hashem is watching over us. And when we do that, we are sure that Hashem will bless us with a year of health, a year of parnasa, a year of peace for Eretz Yisrael, and a year we can be zochet b'la shlem. Thank you all, and have a good evening.